allow me to welcome to our digital Creative Mornings Denver stage, our friend, Sara Rosinsky.
I am overjoyed to be here with a working document. Holy Moses. Okay, so as I was saying, my name is Sara Rosinsky. I am a procrastinator. And I was going to say, I'm a functional procrastinator. I get my taxes in on time. I get my assignments turned in on time, but I definitely have a procrastination situation. So I was listening to a podcast where an expert on procrastination named Joseph Ferrari was talking, and he was saying that it was very important that we not make fun of procrastination because it is a real issue for a lot of people and it can be a serious problem. But then I got his book, and the foreword of the book begins, "This book is long overdue." So I believe that there is room for some well-intentioned humor. And so you will have seen this by now, but I wanted to share this with you, and this, and then my favorite, this. Now, some people here may not suffer from procrastination. And I recommend that you spend the next 40 minutes just gloating or looking at me like I'm an animal in the zoo. You can think of me as a curiosity, but I hope that whether you do procrastinate or don't, that you have fun and that you learn something. So I want to begin by telling you that I am none of these things. I attacked this topic and learned everything I could. And think of me more as a guinea pig, a self-studying guinea pig. I, over the past several weeks, have read articles, I've read books, I have listened to podcasts, I have watched TED Talks, I have conducted polls, and every single person I spoke to, I asked a question, which I'm going to ask you a little later on, and you can be thinking about it. And the question is, if I could snap my fingers and if I could make all of your procrastination disappear, how much would you pay for that to happen? So be thinking about that. I want to tell you a little bit about this guinea pig so that you can kind of compare and contrast your own experiences. As Dave mentioned, I am a copywriter. That means I write propaganda for various companies. I write ads and emails and websites and radio scripts, whatever. And so I get to be creative for my work, which I love. And I'm going to mention this because it will be relevant later. One of my favorite things to do is to be faced with a constrained space that I have to find the perfect words to fit within. So I love a situation where I've got like a 250 pixel ad or a billboard where you can only use 3 words, or you need to come up with a tagline that's only 15 characters long. I actually find those limitations to be liberating. And that phenomenon of being liberated by limitations is actually not uniquely my love. There's an entire genre of writing called constrained writing. And in that genre is haiku, which, if you remember, is a 5-syllable line followed by a 7-syllable line followed by a 5-syllable line. And so since I knew I was going to be talking about haiku, I thought I'd whip one up for today. Take a sip here. So in terms of me being a copywriter, as Dave mentioned, I have this one-woman copywriting company called Shiny Red Copy. And very relevant to procrastination is the fact that I work for myself, which means that on a weekday, I can do whatever I want. I can decide to go to Costco, or I can go for a walk, or I can take a nap. And that can really make things challenging. Another thing I can do is spend time with this temptation. whose name I'm going to whisper because he's in this room and I don't want him to wake up. It's Freddie. So that's my life and my creative career and my situation. So now, without further delay, before I launch in, I do want to let you know sort of where I was on the procrastination topic before I agreed to do this talk. I had sort of these vague understandings of procrastination. I knew I did it, and I was fascinated, for example, by the etymology of procrastination, which is pro, which means forward, and crass, which means tomorrow. And so technically, procrastination simply means moving something to tomorrow, which seems so benign and inconsequential compared to what we all know what procrastination really is. And I would joke that life is the procrastination of death. So I made light of it. But now that I've really jumped into it, I've learned a lot about what it is, and it really has opened my eyes. So I'm going to begin by defining it, which I think a lot of people aren't even clear on this. I certainly wasn't. So procrastination is a gap between your intentions and your actions. If you intend to finish an assignment, if you intend to clean out the garage, if you intend to even do higher level things like learn a language or practice an instrument, any of those intentions, if your actions don't get you there, are you waving? Oh, because there's a child. Okay, I thought there was. That's procrastination in between. And I was really surprised to learn about procrastination that it serves a purpose. And do not get excited because it is maladaptive. It is not a benefit. But procrastination is a type of mood control. And let me explain what that is. When we contemplate some things that we on some level find loathsome, whether it's cleaning the gutters, you get that, or if it's something just emotionally charged, or it's something you would find boring, all of that raises unpleasant emotions in us. And our brains are very intent on taking care of us here and now. And so those unpleasant emotions need to be dealt with. And so we have this inclination to turn away from them and do something more pleasant, happier. And that's what we do. We turn to social media, instant relief. So that's a problem because first of all, it works in the here and now, but then it begins to form a habit. Just like you give a treat to a dog, that dog will repeat the behavior. So the procrastination becomes what I like to call a procrasti-habit. And this is a habit, I've had for a long time. Let me just see what I want to talk to you about next. Oh, yes. So I want to tell you that you have two parts of your brain that are in competition, basically. You have your limbic system, which is what some people call your lizard brain. That's about urgency and acting quickly and from the gut and eating food right now when you're hungry. And not a lot of thinking goes on with the limbic system. It's very visceral. That's an old part of the human brain. A newer part is the prefrontal cortex, which has those sort of higher level ideas, the ones that kind of matter more to us in a lot of ways. And those are when we make plans, that's your prefrontal cortex. And what we have here is what I'm calling, like the push me, pull you in Dr. Dolittle, two forces that really often are not working together. So I will tell you that my procrastination habit does go way back. And I can remember as a child, I would write I would sit down to write a letter, and it would never get further than this, to the degree that my mother collected a multitude of letters that got exactly this far, and she mailed them to me when I was in my 20s. So this goes way back. Then there was a moment in high school, and I remember it when I discovered, oh, if I have an assignment due, I can get up really early in the morning that it's due, and that pressure will force me to get the assignment finished. And there began a long, long habit of putting a certain amount of pressure on myself to work efficiently and get something done. And by this point, my subconscious is so good at knowing when I need to begin a job. It is the type of precision that you would associate with docking the space station. It's phenomenal, but it's not ideal. Um, so if I do have some time, if I don't have that pressure, this is what it feels like to be me. And there's a deadline, let's say a week away. I am in the free and clear. I look at that expanse of time and it's almost joyous. I'm fine. And then as time begins to pass, I look up in that sky and I'll kind of feel this little dark cloud that shows up. And as time passes, that dark cloud gets closer and more dominant and darker. And my husband can tell when I have a deadline hanging over me. It's not a pretty situation, but this is my behavior. So I did notice, and this was a couple of years ago, I noticed that when I had this dark cloud, I was so resistant to beginning writing. But then when I began to write, I discovered not only is this not that hard, but I really enjoy it. So I actually wrote a blog, and this headline refers to an old song, but I seriously had this concept of, I wish that the Sarah who is enjoying this writing, which is not difficult, could write a letter to the Sarah with that dark cloud who resists beginning. How can I be these two people? And I thought that if I wrote that blog, it would actually solve my problem. But sadly, nothing really changed. But then I agreed to do this Creative Mornings thing, and I really started to look at my own behavior with the knowledge of these books and things that I've been reading. And I'm going to share with you some anecdotes that I'm not proud of, but this is my reality, and maybe you can relate. This is how this began. I had an assignment I needed to do. I thought I will begin by cleaning off my desk. That makes good sense. Of course, there were a lot of unfinished books on my desk, as per usual, and one of them needed a bookmark. So I grabbed from a stack of bookmarks and put this one in the book. And when I looked at it, I saw, oh, it's a piece of art about Aaron Draplin, the famous designer. And this is what went through my head. This postcard, I said to myself, is so inappropriate for the person I need to write a letter to, and that's Betty Benison. Betty is in her 80s and she doesn't know who Aaron Draplin is. And that's how the thought process began. Well, the next thing I knew, I'm writing a letter to Betty Benison. Remember, I'm supposed to be working on a job. As I write the letter, and this is real, you guys, this really happened. You can see the sentence. When you called me, I said to Betty, we were in the throes of moving. That's what I wanted to say, but I wrote movie. So I couldn't just write a line through the word movie and move on. I needed whiteout. And since we had just moved, of course, I had no idea where the whiteout was. And I'm telling you, I found myself in the basement going through boxes. Again, I'm supposed to be working on a client assignment. So this is the kind of thing I'm talking about. And when I engage in this behavior, I can only think of family circus. If you're familiar, oh, here's the whiteout. I beg your pardon. I did find the whiteout. I can only think of family circus because Bill Keane, who drew this comic, always had this trope of Billy who would behave this way. One thing would tempt him, and then he would move on to the next thing and to the next thing. And he was so far from his destination. And this seriously is me. So, behavior aside, everything I learned about procrastination was um, I, I wanted to really look at what caused the behavior. What was I turning away from? What fundamentally was frightening me about doing the work, or what it's called aversive, what was so aversive about what I had to do. So I looked inside, and I'm going to share with you what I wrote down in sort of my diary. And I am not proud of this, but here it is. Okay. And so as I look at this from today's perspective, I have been a copywriter since the early 90s. I clearly can handle the work. This is irrational. But basically, when I am faced with these emotions, what one needs to do is just take the first step forward. But anyway, there is what we're dealing with. So I want to invite you into my brain for just a moment. When I am faced with those, aversive feelings, this is what goes on. I sort of get these thoughts. So, all right. Oh, yes. And I wanted to tell you that my creativity, since we're looking at procrastination through the lens of creativity, my creativity is actually what I use to procrastinate. And I noticed that if I needed to accomplish project X, the second I began working on it, I found that project Y popped into my head. I would get some great idea and I would have to pursue that. So, on the one hand, that's great for project Y, but it's really bad for project X. So, one day I had some copywriting to do, and I get it in my head, oh, I should listen to a podcast about procrastination. And I have to tell you, I procrastinated so much work working towards this presentation. But anyway, so I thought I'll listen to a podcast, and I'll work with Illustrator, which is creative, and I love it. So anyway, here's what I made. But again, I certainly was not achieving my initial goal. The other thing that I really, really have trouble with is social media. And I have nearly 5,000 followers on LinkedIn. Great, right? That's wonderful. I totally rationalize using LinkedIn because it does help my career. But I realized that, so I post every morning assiduously, like every day. It's like what I do. Great, right? What I'm basically doing is I'm putting out a post in the subconscious hope that people will comment and come back at me. And then I'll just have to interact with them and answer their questions. And so it's basically a premeditated procrastination. And I liken it to a dog who drops a ball at your feet and says, I want you to play with me. and is trying to like engage, which is, a desirable thing on social media, but it's also pathological in a certain way. So having spoken about procrastination for a while, I now would love to have you answer the question I mentioned earlier.
Here's our results.
Oh my gosh, nothing. Who are you people? I'm serious. I'm so jealous. So does the red indicate that's the winner, Dave? Is that
The red is the winner
Okay,
at 30%.
Interesting. That's significant. I mean, I'm still disturbed by the nothing people. I'm married to one of those people, and that just fascinates me. And again, I am not, for those of you that really, really struggle with it, I am not trying to make light of it. For me, it's a proclivity and a problem, and it's a behavior that I really want to improve. But I'm probably not in the worst 5% of the population, but wow, 20, I think that says something about Creative Mornings, Dave. That gosh, 1 out of 4 people is doing really well. Well, I appreciate your coming. You clearly don't need to be here. Okay. So I'm gonna move now towards kind of the advice section. And I hope the 24% find this interesting, even though you don't need it, and bully for you, by the way. I want to address 2 misconceptions that I think that creative people in particular indulge in. One is kind of this idea that I have to wait for inspiration to strike me. I need the muse to visit me. And I would just remind everybody that the muses are literally a Greek myth, and also mention that even if there is such a thing as surprising inspiration showing up, it will not be frightened away by your getting down and starting to work. So I see, this is this is supposed to be a poet, Hesiod, being inspired by a muse. And I just have to say, boy, is this in stark contradiction to what creative work is like for me. If only it were that good. The other thing that a lot of people say, and I may have even spoken these words myself, is I work best under pressure. The truth of the matter is, no one works their best under pressure. The truth is, I can only work under pressure. And that's what I exemplified with that alarm clock at 5 in the morning in high school, and me beginning a job sort of at the last workable minute. I get the work done, but it's not my best work. If I'm lucky, it's fine. But your best work will be done when you have enough time to check your work, or to contemplate other approaches, or whatever it may be. That's going to help you. Another piece of advice I want to give you, this is a red flag that I made when I probably should have been writing emails for a client. You like it? Thank you. Thank you so much. It's sort of a pink flag, but the word just is almost always problematic. If you find yourself saying, I'll just look at Instagram, or I'll just take out the trash, or I'll just write a letter to Betty Benison, it will often get you off track, and you will get further away from what you, from the goals you really want to achieve. So keep that in mind. I am going to share with you a few what I call off the shelf. They're not solutions, but these can be tools for anybody who wants to try to fight procrastination. At least they may give you some ideas too. This man is named Ivy Lee, and it was like 100 years ago, I think. He was a PR guy. If you're in PR or marketing, you might know of him, but he was hired by, what was it, Bethlehem Steel, um, to improve the productivity of the executives there. And his approach was like this. He said that at the end of every day, write a list of 6 tasks that you want to accomplish on the following day. Um, those, of course, shouldn't be huge things that take 10 years to accomplish, but things that you believe you could do in the course of a day. Write them down in the order of priority. Then, when the next day arrives, begin with item number 1. Do not move on to item number 2 until you have completed item number 1. And the story goes that this was so effective for those executives that he told, what was the guy's name? Charles Schwab. Charles Schwab actually was the head of that group. You just pay me what you think that's worth when you see the results. And Charles Schwab paid him $25,000, which, 100 years ago, it's like over $400,000 today. So that evidently is an effective approach. Another one is called the Pomodoro Method, which you may have heard of before. Pomodoro is Italian for tomato, and this is based on these kind of classic tomato timers. And in the Pomodoro Method, you work in 25-minute chunks, and you get to take breaks according to how many Pomodoros you've completed. And I will just say that back in the day, I found 25 minutes to be so terrifying that I never tried this, but I'm hoping with my new knowledge, I won't find that so scary. Cave Day is another thing that could be good. These are deep focus sessions facilitated daily. That's what they call it. But you're essentially sitting with other people who also want to get work done. And there is definitely an effective phenomenon that happens there when you're around other people who are working quietly. And also there's camaraderie, and I think Cave Day also offers some other, support for this kind of thing. So that's another thing you might contemplate. I'm going to share with you something that I used to find shameful, and now I realize actually has science behind it. So I came up with this approach, I don't know, maybe a couple of years ago, when I had some just loathsome brochure that I had to do, like 36 pages long, whatever it was. And I knew that I just had to get it done. So I would make these little check boxes, and each of those represents a 5-minute commitment. I know that sounds pathetic, but I knew I could do 5 minutes. That's 300 seconds. That's simple, right? Well, as I think I have mentioned, or maybe I haven't, but once you get started, you'll keep going. So as I would, go through these little 5-minute chunks, I would often work much longer, and that actually works. And I will say as an aside here, well, actually, I'm going to save it for later. So that just get started concept is for real. That makes all the difference. I may get a tattoo of this phrase. You don't have to finish the thing. Just tell yourself, if I just get started, just take the first, and it can be such a mundane step. For me, like, I could just tell myself, okay, all I need to do is read the client's website. That's easy. That's a low bar. Once you start to get into it, you'll just keep moving. So I am going to share with you a couple of tactics that I'm going to take. These are kind of personal. You may not want to do the same thing, but for me, I mentioned earlier that I appreciate the constraint of space when I do creative work. And I am going to try to use that same approach and that sentiment toward time. And maybe I will try the Pomodoro method, and I will tell myself, let me see how much I can accomplish in 25 minutes. So, and I just want to compliment myself on finding a stock photo that encapsulates the idea of loving the constraint of time. So, this is a hideous phrase, implementation intention, to which we owe thanks to this scientist or researcher or PhD or whatever his official title is, Peter Gallwitzer. An implementation intention is an if then statement that when you have your prefrontal cortex and your future looking self intact, set that up. So here's an example. Here's an example that Dr. Tim Pitchell uses. He's someone that I owe a debt of gratitude to because he has a podcast. I will share all of these resources later. But anyway, here's a implementation intention that he uses. He wanted to make sure that he did push-ups every day. So his implementation intention was, if I am about to get into the shower, then I will do my push-ups. As a procrastinator, you know that you're going to encounter certain distractions. So you can articulate how you will handle those distractions before you even begin. So if I know that when I work, I get tempted by, let me just think about what I might use. If Freddie needs to go out. So I could say, if while I am working, Freddie needs to go out, then I will ask my husband to take care of that. So these are just things that you can do. So one implementation intention that I am going to use for myself is that if I find myself with that sort of blue sky sensation that I mentioned earlier about I have lots of time, then I am going to finish that sentence with, I have lots of time right now. And I'm really going to make an effort to move things into the present instead of pushing them off. I am now going to go through a few things that I think we can use our creativity to accomplish and then fight procrastination. The first one is our power of observation, which is something that is fundamental to creativity. You know, if you're a novelist, for example, you're observing the world around you. I would invite everyone, even if you're not a procrastinator, to look inside. Some people call it being mindful, but really scrutinize what you are feeling and how you are reacting, and what you are thinking. What are your thoughts? What are your feelings? I think that is really valuable information for implementing change. It certainly, I think, has been for me, although my experiment has not run its course yet. But another way we can use our creativity is to use it to figure out ways to break tasks down. I've alluded to this earlier, but maybe this could even be fun. Maybe, every job that you have to accomplish, whether that's straightening the basement, or rather than thinking I have to go through all the photos and organize them all, you could say, I'm going to start with this one box. I'm going to take care of this one box on Thursday. Far more palatable, and again, it does get you going and you will get further. Accountability is powerful, and I suggest that we use our creativity to make ourselves accountable. Cave Day, sort of harnesses that phenomenon. If you allow yourself to go on social media, you could announce to the world, I am going to finish my application for college or whatever it is by this date. And just by saying that and putting it out in the world, that does a remarkable amount to get you toward your goal. For this talk today, I actually, we set up several checkpoints where I wanted to get things done by each of those checkpoints. And that's very effective. You could, if you live with a loved one, you could tell them, I'm just telling you that I'm going to have whatever it is done by this date. So that's can be helpful. Thwart is such a silly word, but thwart temptation. Essentially, you want to make the path to distraction frustrating. That might be turning off your phone, powering it down, putting it in a sock drawer while you're trying to work. There are apps which I have not purchased, might think about purchasing, but there are quite a few that will keep you away from all of the apps that tempt you during your work time. You can look those up yourself. I don't need to advertise for them right here, but whatever that may be. And again, you may want to give your phone to your wife or husband or whatever. And I think most appropriately and importantly, I spoke earlier about that push me, pull you between our limbic system, the here and now, and that much more forward looking part of ourselves. We have a lot of trouble thinking about that future self of ours, to the point where with brain scans, scientists have seen that when we imagine our future selves, we sort of perceive it the same way we do a stranger. We're very disconnected from that future self. But as creatives, I would encourage everyone to think really hard about what that future person is. And it might just be, a week away when we've completed an assignment and we feel so good. And it might be that, or it might be when I get my company off the ground and I am pulling in a certain income that I want to achieve, or whatever our goals are, or after I start my nonprofit. But really try to imagine and empathize with that future self of yours. That will help you. And then I think the next slide, yes, I wanted to tell you that was it yesterday, I think? I thought I'm going to try to get a job done early. This is something I never did before, ever. But I really implemented everything that I've shared with you. And I stuck with it and I got it done and I turned it in early. And as you can see from my client, that was well received. And so I have to say, this stuff works. And again, I will be sharing a bibliography, and if people want to learn more, they can. So I would like to conclude this by just sincerely thanking Creative Mornings for giving me the opportunity to think about procrastination and look at it more closely. I can honestly say I have a long road ahead of me. There are no super quick fixes to this behavior that I've been using since I was 15 years old. No, longer than that. I started as a small child. So anyway, it's not going to be solved immediately, but I sincerely feel like this is going to change my life for the better. And so I say thank you. And I would love to hear from other people about both their struggles and their solutions. I think it's helpful to know that those of us who do struggle with procrastination, that we're not alone. There are commonalities and there are tactics for improving. So thanks.
All right, everyone, that's the mic drop. Come off mute and let's give Sarah a big round of applause.